Hello, everybody. Can I get everybody's attention? All right, we're going to go into the zacuce update. For those of you who were at the Gumbar, you recall that we gave you a progress update on our progress towards building a community center in this area. And we promised you at that presentation that we'd be back again here to give you another update. So I'm going to go through some recent progress that we've made. And then I'm going to turn it over to Cyrus Ravetna, who's going to do the bulk of today's presentation. For those of you who don't know who Cyrus is, he is our architect, and he's going to be spending some time going through the research that he's done on Dubermers, and then he's going to walk you through our building plan. And then lastly, I'm going to turn it over to Cyrus Mehta, who's going to give you an update on our fundraising strategy. Some trees and shrubs. So those are a couple pictures of that. And I also wanted to thank Tina Mehta, because this was her idea. She came to us and suggested it was something that we should consider, and we thought it was a great idea. So thank you to Tina. So at the Gumbar, we told you we were considering 3 different options for how to build the center. The first was to build it all at once, and then we had 2 additional options of 2 different phased approaches. In the end, after much discussion, we decided to build all at once for a couple reasons. 1, overall, it is the most cost-effective. 2, from both a design, architectural design, as well as from a construction standpoint, building one sort of seamless design from the start is a better approach than trying to kind of do half of it and then bolt on another extension later. And then the last reason was, frankly, second phases have a tendency not to get built. So with that in mind, we thought, well, what does the community absolutely need right from the start? And we wanted to make sure that we cut down the square footage as much as possible, because obviously it's a big amount to fundraise. So we took a look at what the community currently needs. And we need, obviously, a place for our monthly religion classes. And we need a place where we can gather a couple times a year for functions like this. So with that in mind, we knew we needed an assembly hall for, again, big parties. And then for the religion classes, we're thinking that we're going to operate the same way that we do right now with Gibson Hall, which is in one large room. The kids would go to their respective corners, and then the adults have their discussion in a separate place. And in our design, that would be the atrium. And then we also knew that we wanted a prayer hall, because that was the reason why several donors gave to us in the first place. So those are the absolutely critical things that we need. We decided to take out classrooms and a library. That was a nice thing to have, and by taking that out, we've cut down about 600 square feet. And the good news is, if we ever decide that we need that in the future, we have the flexibility where we could probably extend. So after many revisions with Cyrus, we went back and forth, and we finally settled on a floor plan that we think is going to work, and he's going to go through that. Throughout this whole process, our building committee has been hard at work, and the building committee is made up of Nasher Kranja, Eric Patel, Temton Tesseldar, and Kersi Bakaria. And actually, in the late fall or early winter, Eric Patel, as well as Cyrus by the phone, met with the Mount Laurel Township. And the idea was to give them a preview of the site and the plans that we have to make sure that they were comfortable. We got to introduce ourselves, and that we kind of also figured out what they were looking for from us, and to potentially avoid, any problems down the road. So we actually learned a lot of things that they were expecting of us from that meeting. Next, we formed a fundraising committee, because obviously in order to get this built, we're going to need some funds. And so the members of the committee are listed there, and you're going to hear from Cyrus, who's representing the committee. And then lastly, for those of you who know Jasmine Chapgar, Jasmine created a brochure for us to help with our fundraising efforts. And we have copies available if anyone's interested in taking a look or picking one up to give to families and friends that may be in a position to donate. In terms of where we are with the timeline, since the last time I showed this slide at the Gumbar, we've finalized the design, and we are presenting it to you here today. I want to stress a couple of things. One, this is a tentative timeline, so it's going to depend on how successful we are with getting the approvals that we need from the township and having everything like that go according to plan. And the other big factor is obviously funds. We are not going to start construction on the center until we feel confident that we have the money to get it done. So we are optimistic and hopeful that 2 years from now we could actually be celebrating Nowruz in our own place. So that's what we're working towards. And I think with that, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Cyrus. A couple things I want to mention. Cyrus flew in from Chicago for a quick trip here just to do this presentation. So we certainly appreciate that. And secondly, I also want to point out that Cyrus is donating his personal time and the services that he spends for this project free of charge for us. So we really appreciate that. Every month when we have our meeting, he's there, he dials in for the first 20 minutes, so he is giving a lot of his time and making it a commitment, and we really appreciate that. So, thank you.
Hello. First, I'd like to thank you all for having me here. It's a great honor and a privilege to be working with the community and to be able to design this building. I think it's a beautiful opportunity, and it's a great opportunity for the community also to build a home that will fulfill its needs for the next generations. So I'm going to begin today by first talking a little bit about the history and the traditional architecture of the Zoroastrian fire temples. A little bit in Iran, but mostly the research I did in India. So I spent about 3 months in India actually studying the Zoroastrian fire temples. And I did that by visiting most of the major sites in Gujarat and several of them in Bombay. I think I visited probably over 30 or 40 fire temples. And I documented them with sketches, photographs, and then just understood the way that they were built and the traditions and the architecture of the fire temple. So the first thing to understand in a religious building is that a religious building is a reflection of the beliefs of that religion. So our Zoroastrian fire temples are very different than a Christian church and very different from a Jewish synagogue and from a Baha'i temple, for example. So our architecture is distinct and unique in its own right. So they're different in size. So the actual size of the building varies depending on the type of religion and the type of building it is. The layout, so that the way that they're laid out in the orientation of the rooms. The location, where the building is located. The details, so the ornament on the building varies from different architectural building types. And most important to me is the environment that's created. So when I walk into a Zoroastrian fire temple, I feel very different than when I walk into a Christian church or a Jewish synagogue. And that difference is intentional. It's not something arbitrary. It's an intentional difference that's been carried down from generations and from the past. So first we'll quickly just take a look at some of the other religious styles. So these are some typical Hindu temples in India. The one on the right is the temple in Madurai. And you can see it's a massive, massive building. Just to, I have my pointer. So just to walk around, this is the temple here. And just to walk around it takes almost 30 or 40 minutes. That's how large the building is. And so this is what I call a hyper-ornate building, where all of this detail has a story and a history behind it. The Muslim style is, of course, once again, to build grand, massive monuments. And when you walk into a mosque, you feel overwhelmed. It's a huge, massive space, and they need the large space because they have a group congregation, and they all meet at one time to pray. Christian style, similarly, are massive monuments. So when you walk into St. Peter's in Rome, you're overwhelmed by the size. And that's meant to make the human seem more insignificant and the Almighty seem more significant. And of course, they have group congregations, so they need larger buildings that can accommodate for hundreds of people to observe their sermons. And then we come to our Zoroastrian style. So we traditionally do not have group congregations or group services. So we have individual worships